Also,
As am I, so we should be good to go.
fantastic.
Awesome.
Incredibly zoomed in for some reason. I don't know why. Okay, that's better. All right, we are here. Montaigne, thank you so much for coming onto Homebrew. You are our first guest of 2025, so welcome.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And you're the first person in history that can say you're the first guest on Homebrewed in 2025. That's also a huge accomplishment.
That's really awesome. I'm gonna add that to my CV.
Yeah, your list of honors, like that, we've got a Grammy nomination. We've obviously, hottest 100 countdown appearances, featuring on massive tracks as well as your own, and then first guest for 2025 on the Homebrewed podcast.
Yeah, not bad.
Records are there. It's fantastic. But no, seriously, thank you for joining us. And we should kick off based off of your recent trip to Japan. How was that? I have a good friend over in Japan right now, and it looks awesome. And for some reason, my partner is just not interested in Japan for some reason. I keep telling her
Oh,
that
that's
we really
nuts.
need to go to Japan. She's like, oh, just not really on my list. And I'm like, well, what's going on there? So could you do your best case making for why travel to Japan is necessary?
I mean, I can make the case for people like me who, I've been wanting to go to Japan since I was 12 because I was really into this Japanese RPG called Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy and sort of all these Square Enix games. And that's the home of all that stuff. And by extension, I guess I'm a fan of, anime as well and a lot of other JRPGs and the language and a lot of music there. So I've been looking forward to going for a long time. It was my first time. And it's just really cool. Like, I think if nothing else, if you don't relate to that sort of geek culture stuff, then I think going for, I guess, the uniqueness of the place. It's not really like anywhere else in the world. It's very much got a singular culture. It was very interesting noticing all the different things and ways that they live and sort of interact with each other as a people. It's just beautiful. It's like really clean and the countryside is really gorgeous. And again, like the sort of flora and fauna there is quite singular. And the food is really good. I didn't get to eat, I think I'm vegan, and one of the pitfalls of being vegan is that you sort of miss out on food culture quite a lot, which is sad. But there was a lot of vegan stuff to eat as well. So if your partner's vegan, I don't know. But otherwise, it's one of these places where you can probably just like walk into almost anywhere and you get a pretty good feed. So anyway, that's my case for Japan. But yeah, I very much went for like kind of, well, a combination of pop culture, but also I saw a bit of music and the music was awesome as well. And, just to like sort of travel around a bit and see something new and stuff. And that was really nice. So yeah.
Fantastic. That's an excellent case made. So thank you for that.
No problem.
Very much interested in Japan. Genuinely, did you find yourself influenced music wise by Japanese culture, or have you previously, with your kind of history and interest in the culture generally, found yourself influenced by music from Japan?
I think so. A lot of my favorite music and favorite artists are Japanese. And I find especially the music I've made in the last 5 years is very influenced by Japanese artists like Kaho Nakamura and Cornelius. And I'm trying to think of literally anyone else, like Harume Hosono and like all the Yellow Magic Orchestra guys and so many other artists like Sarah as well. So yeah, I would say so. I think I really enjoy how much they use like jazz in their music, even like sort of pop or songwriter music. A lot of it is very jazz inflected, jazz chords and tendencies and stuff, which I really like. Which is funny because I don't really like, I'm not a trained musician or singer or anything. I don't know how to play jazz or anything. I think I just really like the chord progressions and stuff. And so a lot of the artists I mentioned are really good at fusing those elements with maybe something a bit more like funky or like experimentally electronic and like all of that. And I'm a big fan of that kind of thing. So yeah, it was really cool to go there. And I did see the band Sarah play live there, like a sold out show at a venue called Liquid Room, which was really awesome. And I saw another band there in support called, a name I can never remember. It's like Chaco Ping Quin or something like that. It's like long. It's long and I don't know what it means. So they were awesome as well. And yeah, I had a great time. Yeah, I think Japanese indie music is like some of the best ever.
Is that name their equivalent of King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard or something like that?
Maybe. I don't know if any wizards or animals are being invoked, but it kind of sounds like that.
I want to touch on, what it feels like to go to a gig in Japan. Sort of had this loosely over the last few interviews we did towards the end of last year, where we had artists traveling and we're just curious, picking their brains about music in different parts of the world. But I'll just rewind. Did you say you're not a trained musician? Like vocally, you never had training or anything?
Well, I didn't grow up with training. I went to a vocal coach when I was around like 21 because I really damaged my voice recording my first album because I wasn't trained and my breathing was bad. I think I was also just very stressed, and a lot of like vocal skill is about like reducing tension in your body and being able to hold yourself quite relaxed or breathing from the right place. And I was like not doing that. I was very tense. I would say I was having a very tense time in my life, and it was really coming through my singing. It fucked my voice up. And so I went to a vocal coach and a speech therapist just to make sure I was learning how to speak and sing in a way that was healthy. But otherwise, yeah, I guess like I developed my ability to pitch and harmonize myself when I was just growing up and singing along to music and stuff.
That's wild, because I feel like you have one of those voices where everyone hears and goes, man, that is an amazing voice. So to hear that you haven't had lessons or any form of training is quite wild to me. It gives me hope, even though I know I'm nowhere near your level.
Yeah, look, I also come from like a Filipino family, and we Filipinos are notorious for being very good singers. So, my grandma, I think she's a classically trained singer, and my aunt is not trained, but she's also very good just organically, naturally. So I think there's like a bit of a gene in my Filipino blood for singing, I think.
And there's a Spanish side in there too, I saw recently as well. So there's, I guess there's, cultural history there of very good singers as well. All right, so let's go back to Japan. Seeing a live gig in Japan, what was the one thing that sort of stood out to you as very wow compared to going to a gig here?
The thing that immediately stood out was there was one support act, the one I mentioned, and me and my friend hadn't had dinner yet, so we were like, okay, let's go get dinner before we go to the gig. We'll be a bit late for the support, and then just, whatever, like turn up and then watch Sarah and stuff like that. So we got to the support like 15 minutes late. And the most shocking thing to me was that every single person that had bought a ticket was already in that room and had almost certainly already been in that room from the moment that the gig began. And I thought that was stunning because like people do not turn up for support music in Australia generally. Like, maybe a quarter, maybe a bit less than that might turn up to the first support, and then maybe half or a few more to second support if there is one. And then, obviously everyone will turn up for the headliner because they've usually bought a ticket for that artist. But like, yeah, everyone was there. Literally everyone was in the room. It was jam packed and we had to go right to the back of the room. I was pressed against the wall at the back of the room, like 900 cap gig. And I was like, yeah, I guess the thing about that is like didn't see a second gig. So I wasn't sure if that was indeed the culture of it, that like when you go see a gig, you turn up for the support as well, or if it was just that everyone was really excited about that particular support. Because I did look them up later, and I think they have like quite a lot of buzz around them, this band. So could have just been that. But I was very impressed. I was like, it's cool that people showed up to see an act that maybe they didn't necessarily pay money to see, but Yeah, and like literally every single person. I cannot stress enough. Like, I think we were the last people to newly enter the room after we arrived. Like, it was insane. Anyway, it was cool.
Very cool. And yeah, I think that's like, I mean, I've definitely been guilty of it. It's like, oh, well, we'll go get dinner. You're looking for set times. The main act is on for till whenever, and you're trying to squeeze things in. But we really should 100% be going and catching support acts, because that's how I've also discovered a lot of bands that I really, really like. So
Yeah.
it'd be a great thing for us to import into our culture if that is in fact the way they do things in Japan. But you're back on home soil now, and you are preparing for your fourth album, a new album that's coming up or due for release early this year. So tell us a little bit about that release. We've had two singles from it so far, which are really, really good, and we will talk about. It's your first new solo work in a couple of years or so. So let's chat about that release, what's upcoming, and yeah, what it's going to mean to you.
Yeah. I'm very excited for it. I think it's really good. I produced it all by myself for the first time, which I feel really good about as well. I think, there's still a bit to be learned, and you can hear it in the record, or maybe you can't. I think this is the thing. I think most people will hear it and just be like, that's a complete music record. I can, listening to it, be like, okay, I reckon I actually could have made this longer and included more movements and added more detail here or added less detail there, this, that, or the other, right? But I'm, on the whole, pretty happy for my first effort. Like, I think as someone who has already released a lot of music, people won't notice too much like a difference in quality, if you know what I mean. Like, I don't think it sounds amateurish, which is good. Yeah, that's, I guess, the technical aspect of it, and I guess the rest of it is I feel very proud of like the kind of reflection and introspection I've done and how I've funneled it into the music, and I guess hopefully brought some kind of insight, or at least like mirror to people. Hopefully they can see some of their experiences reflected in the music and feel a little bit less like abnormal or maybe unsafe or something like that, because it's very much a record about like being vulnerable, coming to terms with really unfair things, inexorably unfair things, like things that can't be corrected, and just like learning to move on with your life and all that stuff. And yeah, I think that's like the main theme of my life. I think, it's the main theme of a lot of human life, but particularly for me, I think like there are so many things in my life where I'm like, I literally, like, there is no solving this problem, It's an unsolvable problem, which is like one of the worst things in the world, right? Because I got a problem-solving brain. I'm like, I always want to try to resolve things, but yeah. So I guess that's the crux of the album in terms of like, I guess, thematic content. Yeah, and then like the aesthetic quality of it is like a whole different thing as well.
On the production, so the two songs that we've heard from this upcoming album so far, Talking Shit and Everybody Else, they are obviously part of this album, so they are all both self-produced, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so the good thing about that is I've heard those songs and I don't hear any dip in production quality. So there's a big tick automatically for you. But
Thank you.
I want to dive into some of the production elements on Talking Shit in particular. It is there are pop elements, but it's almost like you've gone, okay, instead of a traditional bass line I can play on a keyboard, let's make it a double bass or whatever the instrument is. Like it's like every individual element of the track is pop adjacent in a sense. Like you've chosen a chime here instead of a key here. You've chosen, the little heavy guitar to break up a little bit between the chorus and etc. Talk me through some of those production choices. Like, were you consciously sitting there going, no, this isn't the sound, this isn't the sound? Or were you just throwing stuff together and that's how it came out?
It's a bit of both. I think for me, it is a lot of just intuition and following my fancy. Like, part of the process of making this record was like putting together a playlist of things I wanted to emulate, and then just kind of copying those things and taking pieces and putting them into new songs. So especially with Talking Shit, the double bass thing was like a lot of this record was really influenced by a record called The Hour of the Bewilderbeast by Badly Drawn Boy, which is a very played record. There's not a lot of MIDI or digital elements on there. There's a bit. There's like some synth stuff and a bit of like artifacty stuff and all that, but it's very like guitar, piano, strings, drums kind of thing. And there is a song on there called The Shining, which is the first track on the album, which is really beautiful. And it's I don't know, I kind of like wanted to bring a little bit of that into this song to begin with, and then with the rest, I guess, yeah, it's very much like I don't know how like people who paint or like come to finish their painting and decide that's all the strokes that are required and all the colors that are required and stuff like that. But I imagine it's similar to me making music, which is just like I'm kind of just like picking stuff up, listening to it, being like, is this right? Putting it into place, demoing it. No, it's not right. Let's try a different sound, like, and trying again. And again, like a lot of that is then modeled by music that I like, and trying to meld the music that I like, because I do like a lot of different music. So yeah, I don't know. I think, yeah, there's not really any rhyme or reason to like the choices that I make. I think if the sound feels good and it feels good with the other sounds that I'm putting in, then I tend to include it. But yeah, like with well, this is the other thing is like, I really allowed the record to be made by my limitations, because I don't, like I told you, I'm not really trained in any instrument except for, well, I'm not trained in my voice. I'm trained in my voice insofar as I have developed it by myself over time, and I have trained it to be able to do things. But like, I'm not, yeah, I don't have like formal training, I suppose, in any instrument. And so a lot of my decision-making process with the arrangement was like, okay, can I play something to the complexity required? No. So I will just play it simply. Or I will hire a musician who does know how to play something maybe a bit more complex. And, you know, that ended up me being outsourcing the guitar to this Japanese guitarist, Shuda Nishita, who played on one of my favorite records. That was really inspirational to this record. And like drums as well, there's like 2 tracks that have, I think, my drummer, who I've been working with for like 12 years, playing drums on it, just because like I couldn't really, I think, you know, there's also limitations to programming drums, because it's hard to make them sound like organic and played and have the dynamics be highly, you know, fluid and evolve in a single second and all that stuff. So yeah, I just relied on whatever like samples on Splice there were that fit, and like, or any other sounds that I digged up on the internet or whatever. So that like, you know, metal guitar, you know, interjection that happens sometimes is just a Splice sample. That was just like, like I noticed it worked in the key of the song that I was making, and I liked how it punctuated the music and was kind of surprising. So I threw it in there, and that was kind of a lot of how a lot of choices got made.
Yeah, I really digged it. And, you know, the drums are another example. It's not a classic pop beaty drum. It almost feels like a primary school instrument type thing that you just find laying around, like almost like the plasticky kind of drums. That's the vibe that I get from, and that's why I was curious about your choices that you made, because it all comes together so well. But it's not, your classic pop stuff, which is why I was wanting to pick your brain on how it all came together.
Well, yeah, I can speak more to the drums. The drums are interesting. I think the drums were just a like 3 loops on Splice that I processed the shit out of, and honestly, like processing is a lot of my production sort of process. Like I'm often. Sometimes I'm very much programming things and sliding like snares and hats and stuff into place and kicks into place. But like with that song, it was just like I got 3 different loops from like 3 different genres, and then I got like Isotope Trash 2, and I just like destroyed those sounds like with Isotope Trash 2. I just like distorted them and overdrove them, and that's what I ended up getting, like with the sounds and stuff like that. And I shifted some of like the hits from the loops into different places to allow for different fills and stuff like that. But otherwise, yeah, it was mostly just like the loops and then processing them. And yeah, again, that can be said for like a lot of the sounds in my songs. It's just like distorting the waveform, and like putting, because I use Ableton Live, I just use like Redux a lot, or if I don't think Redux is doing the job, then I'll get some other sort of like distortion plugin and just use that as well. So yeah.
Do you think your lack of kind of formal music training is what allows you to kind of step outside the bounds of traditional production? And we see so many artists doing that now, but I think the way you do it is so striking, and I could echo what Cam said in terms of his intrigue about the production, similarly to everybody else. It's so unique and so almost unorthodox that from my perspective as a non-musician, it's like, how did you arrive there? How did you get there in the first, how did you even conceive an arrangement or sounds like that? And they come together with this, like, it's so satisfying to listen to. So any doubts you have about your own production, I would put them to bed, because listening to it, I was like, this is just so cool and unique. But do you think that lack of traditional training allows you to kind of step outside the bounds, or do you think it's more reflective of your wide range of influences, and maybe more you as a person?
I think yes, like the choices I make, as the choices we all make, are informed both by what we know and what we don't know. So yes, I would say, I guess I would also point to like Grimes, who is probably my inspiration in terms of production, because she's the same. She doesn't really have training. I think she's probably developed some skills at instruments as she has made records and stuff like that. But like, I remember her talking about Art Angels, which is like one of the core inspirations for this record as well. And how, yeah, she was just like playing things shittily and then editing them into place, like in the recording. And, one of her tenets as well for making things were like, if I'm putting a snare down, I'm putting like 4 different snares down, like in the same place, to just thicken or like make the sound a bit more interesting or complex. And like that, I think she has a wild and free interpretation of making music, and she doesn't give a fuck about like genre and the way things are supposed to be done or fit together or whatever. She's just sort of doing them. So I sort of just ran with that ethos as well, partly because, yeah, it's like I don't have training and I actually don't really care like about any formal standards or techniques or whatever. Like, I think if it sounds good, it sounds good. And it was definitely taking from her wheelhouse, and yeah, I feel good about it. Like, I think if the aim is to like make something that sounds dope and not something that sounds correct or whatever, you're always going to get something dope. So yeah, I think it would be nice to be able to play some things a little bit better. I think because my partner's like kind of a wizard. Like, he also didn't grow up with formal training. He sort of just taught himself piano, but he really knows how to play the piano. Like, he really understands the way that chords relate to each other and progress, and how to make nice melodies and build nice harmonies and stuff like that. And I really envy that. Like, I wish I knew a little bit more about like intervals and the relationship of chords with each other, and there's always something I can learn, right? It's just like, I guess something I'm never interested enough in like committing to learning, which is why I still cannot really play an instrument very well, like for a long time I also felt guilty about that, because I was like, I'm in music, like why don't I want to play an instrument that much, or like am I just lazy, I guess was the main thought, is like I just don't want to like practice playing an instrument. But then like, there's so many people I've worked with who love playing their instrument. Like, they love it. And I'm like, oh, okay, I just don't love it. Like, I just actually just don't have the love to pick up the guitar and fumble through it till I get good at it, or piano, same thing. It's like, I guess my voice is my big thing, and also achieving like the final world of the song is like my favorite thing. So yeah, I feel like I definitely have a unique approach to things, which is good. I wish it was slightly better balanced out with some know-how, some actual know-how with like instruments and stuff. But ultimately, that's why I also just have friends I message and say, hey, can you play on this? Like teamwork makes the dream work. So.
Whatever you're doing is working because we're absolutely digging all of not just the new stuff but your older stuff as well, and everything that you've been, the way you make it, the way that your brain is ticking to make all of these sounds and melodies and everything. We love it. So we're very happy to see it continuing with a new album coming out shortly. What can you tell us about it? Can you drop any?
I don't know. I can probably.
details?
It's a bit like it's coming out. It's coming out in the first half of this year. It's probably a couple months away, a few months away. But I don't know. I haven't really talked to my team about like what it's going to be called and stuff. But the thing is, like, now that I guess it's funny, like I just don't really care about, or I don't know if it's I don't care about, but I don't feel like the impact of a rollout, if you know what I mean. Like, there are a lot of artists out there. One I notice a lot is like Halsey. They're always like, here's a secret message you need to decode to figure out when like the release date of my album is, or like here's a special version of this song that's hinting at another song, or like whatever, that kind of thing. Like this sort of gradual like mystery revealing rollout of like making sure, this is the date when we're announcing the album title, and this is the date when we're really revealing the artwork, when this is coming out. I don't really care about any of that. In my perfect world, it's kind of like you announce whenever that the album is coming out, and then it comes out, and then people listen to it. But of course, all the pomp and circumstance is like kind of necessary because marketing, blah blah blah. And I'm like, this is the problem: is like my brain just doesn't work that way. Like I don't have a marketing brain. I don't care about it. So like I'm very bad at actually keeping that information close to my chest. And I've definitely told, like on stream, I've told people when the album is probably going to come out and what the title of the album is, or the vague gist of it. But so basically the answer is like, I don't know. I don't know. I know my team kind of vaguely has a plan about like timelines and stuff like that, probably. I haven't like properly reconvened with them this year yet because they're still sort of like on leave. I think they came back today, so probably have a chat about that this week. But album's out this year. There's a title of the album. There's 10 songs. I think there's 10 songs. Pretty standard album. And yeah, I don't know. I think the other part of it is just that like we live in a world now where like, I don't know, you kind of just like, you're posting all the time and you're just like online, right? And I've found it difficult with this album to maintain like that album facade. Like there's a lot of people out there who when they're on an album rollout will only post about the album, but I'm not like that because I'm chronically online and I like posting and I like sharing things with people. So it also, that just makes it sort of become a blur because it's you're sort of juggling this like idea of a momentous release but also just like doing anything else. I don't know, very weird. So yeah, that's where I'm at with all that.
I really liked that not answer because, some artists would be very coy and like, oh, I can't give too many details. You're just like, yeah, I would, but I genuinely don't know these things. So that's my answer. So it's genuine. I believe that you're not 100% sure where these things are going because, ultimately that's not what you're interested in. You're interested in actually making the music and you just want to sort of put it out there as opposed to the marketing planning behind it.
Yeah.
But it does I'm curious now how you're chronically online, you love sharing, but you don't like the marketing side of things. I would have thought that would have been almost a perfect marriage.
I think I like being a participant in the internet, not necessarily a purveyor, if you know what I mean. Like I enjoy seeing things online. I do post and I enjoy sharing things, but those things are never like, I think what I think of in terms of marketing is like my parents would always get on my back about like not having a polished internet presence. Like they would always say like, look at Vera Blue. All of her photos are like professionally taken of a live gig, whatever. She's always wearing beautiful clothes. She's always got her makeup done. She's always like, the brand is all there and it's perfect. And there's like the facade doesn't drop of like this being this beautiful artist kind of thing. And I would always just hit back and just be like, look, I don't care. Like, it may be the case that does work and it does foster greater fan attention and attachment and stuff like that. But my problem is that like I'm a really rough and ready person, and I do not give a fuck about like all of that stuff. And also I just don't have the money to like maintain all that stuff. Like professional photography costs money. Like being dressed nice costs money. Having your makeup done, it doesn't cost money necessarily, but it's like, I guess that's an entirely different conversation for me because I have my own journey with makeup and my appearance and stuff like that. But like I, when I share on the internet, it's usually like, here is like the hard feeling that I had today that I had to work through. And I hope, sharing this hard feeling or like this bad day makes you feel a bit more normal. And that's what I like doing on the internet, but it isn't like a particularly like covetous thing, if you know what I mean. Like with marketing, I think often what you want to inspire is envy, and I don't really like that. I don't like inspiring envy. I don't like the notion that the way to sell myself is by presenting myself as better than other people, if you know what I mean. Which is like, that's to me, I'm not on a high horse with that. Just because like other artists with brands do that doesn't mean I'm like, ugh, can't believe they're doing that. Like I'm all for people who maintain like the artist facade of like living a cool life and doing cool things and looking beautiful, but like I just personally in my own heart can't find myself to like actually care about that much. So I guess that's what I mean with the marketing stuff. Like, and I guess consistency is also a weak spot for me, is like posting about the same thing or like posting about the same thing or posting about something in a similar way to the last way I posted about things, right? Like it's in the name of my project. I'm named after Michel de Montaigne, who's like a French philosopher from the 16th century. And he was a skeptic, and he was also a guy who was like, man is both monster and miracle, and was like, we all contain multitudes, and very much I contain multitudes. We all do. But like, I don't think I try to put any guardrails around my multitudes. I'm like, just whichever one is awake today is the one that's going to go out there. You know what I mean? Like, I don't say, no, I have to pick this one of my many multitudes. This version of Jess has to be the one that's always appearing on the internet. I'm like, any version is good for me, right? But again, that's like bad marketing. Because like, I remember, sorry, I'm rambling a lot, but I remember when I was like releasing my album Complex, and like I dyed my hair and it was curly and all this shit. And then I said to my management, like, I'm kind of thinking of like cutting all my hair off. And they were like, do not fucking do that, because you're about to release an album, and on the album cover and all your press photos, you've got curly white hair, so you have to have curly white hair. Yeah, continuity. And, it is important, like, for recognizability and all that stuff. But again, I don't, this is why I'm a bad commercial artist, is like, I just don't care that much, and I just want to cut my hair all off, So I don't know. And then, by extension, this is why I'm doing my career the way I'm doing it now, with Patreon and not with a label and all that stuff, because I know that the way I am doesn't work for the label system and stuff like that. But there are people who are fans of mine who appreciate my changeability and the way I authentically sort of am myself and all of that. So I just rely on them giving me $5 a month or whatever, and that's good. So that's a very long answer to your question, but that's the answer, I guess.
No, again, loved the answer. Because I think you say you're a bad marketer, but I actually feel like I'm not saying you've set the trend, but I feel like you're almost now on trend for a lot of marketing, particularly for an individual, where it's be more authentic, be more real, be more yourself. And you've been doing that from day dot, because all the other forms of marketing you didn't enjoy. So I actually think, you're not a bad marketer. You said you're just not the commercial style of marketing, and
Yeah.
that's why you're going down the way that
I guess, yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it, is like, I'm not commercially minded, which I guess yeah, it sort of depends on what the framing is like, what is bad and good? Is good like commercially successful, or is good just like successful at attracting an audience of any size, and maybe I'm good at attracting little freaks like me, who knows? But yeah, no, to your point, yes, like, and I definitely feel good about the way I'm doing things, and like, I think I'm good at kicking out the voice in my head that is my parents saying like, you're not doing your career right. I can't tell you how insane the way they would talk to me about my career was. It was like, Lisa Mitchell posts 4 times a week. You need to be posting as much as Lisa Mitchell. It's like, I'm not Lisa Mitchell, and 2, huh? What do you mean? I don't have 4 things to post a week. Like, you wanted me to fucking post my shitty lunch? Like, I'm not doing that. Anyway.
Hang on, though, and I mean, to springboard off what Cam said in response to that, I think particularly towards the end of last year, so many of the artists we were speaking to kept coming back to this common theme, which I don't know why this happens to us, but it does, of authenticity. And of course, authenticity is obvious, and everybody seeks it in one way or another. But I think at the moment, with the way things are, I think people and fans very much appreciate actually feeling like what they're seeing is the artist who they have an attachment and some kind of connection to. And I think you do that really, really well. And it's not like, super clinical and polished, but I don't think that would reflect you as an artist. And then the flip side of that is you share in great detail parts of yourself and parts of your life with your fans too, which is ultimately, I think most people are seeking that from artists. It's like one thing to love the music, but if you love the music enough, you're going to have an interest in the artist. One such example of that came with the release of Everybody Else, and you kind of just touched on your family there, and I do not want you to speak to any degree to which you're not comfortable, but you did detail really specifically online about thematically what that song was about. The background of the song, it was your relationship with your mother and the consequences of intergenerational trauma that you're still bearing today. And you said earlier in the interview, the album's in a large part about the things that we just cannot change, that suck, and that we have to accept. So how was it putting those things into songs and doing that really difficult thing? I mean, I would encourage everybody to check out your posts online about that, because to get the detailed lowdown. But we're speaking on one hand about this production side of it. It's your first self-produced album. You're doing these things. You're kind of just throwing things and making what sticks come together in this beautiful arrangement. But then the other side of that is thematically, you're touching on things that are really difficult, really complex, and that have obviously had a really big impact on you. So to meld those things together and present them, how has that felt?
At the end of it all, it's felt really good. I really feel like I've accomplished something for myself, which is really nice, which is just to package up, a lot of things, a lot of the most serious things I've ever felt, and present it in a way that I think does justice to them. I feel really good about that. Making all of the songs was, for the most part, fun, I would say. There were a couple of songs, there's a few songs on that album where it was like a bit of, what's the word? A bit vulnerable, I guess, to make them. Like, there's definitely, Everybody Else is one of those songs where I was like, man, this song bangs, but also, like, every time I listen to it, I'm crying. It's like I think all the lyrics in that song, I don't know what was happening that day, but I was really on one, and I really, touched my own heart, I think, with the things that I wrote in that song, and I still feel that way, especially when I have to sing it and talk about it in public. So I feel this is the thing, is like, I've always been if nothing else, my strength is sitting in vulnerability and in hard feelings and moving through them, and as painful and heartbreaking sometimes as making those songs is, and then having to live with them is, it's like, I'm good at that. You know what I mean? I have survived a lot because I'm resilient. I'm good at that. So, yeah, and honestly, like it's a joy to share that stuff with other people. If partly because there's a lot of catharsis to be offered to other people in sharing these kinds of things, because so many people very silently suffer from their relationships with their families, but also because my mum's whole thing when I was growing up was like, you don't tell people family secrets, and family secrets were always the awful way that my mum treated me, and that made me into a person who wanted to tell everyone everything, because I didn't want to hide what I was going through. Like, I think shame stops a lot of people from talking about the things that they've gone through, but I had the opposite response from a very young age, where I was just like, whatever is in me always knew like this was not right. Like, I think some people growing up thinking I deserve this, or this is just how people treat their children or whatever. But for me, I was always like, no, this is disordered and dysfunctional, and I don't like it, and I don't want to be around it. And so sharing, my life and those things that happen with my audience or with my friends or people I meet or whatever is like very, what's the word? It makes me feel very seen. It makes me feel real, which is something I've struggled with growing up. So, yeah, I'm very happy to have made this album, made these songs. And the only thing that's really stopped me so far with directly addressing it is like maintaining a relationship with my parents, which I'm not attempting to do anymore. So, it is the right time for it all.
Yeah, it's super complex, but it's admirable how you've gone about sharing that. And have you had people kind of from within your audience or people that reach out, particularly in response to everybody else, and share how that song had impacted them, whether they could resonate or relate to it?
Yeah, a lot of people reached out when I released that song and released those words on social media. I think a lot of people encounter mental illness in their families, and some mental illness, of course, is manageable, but sometimes, especially with personality disorders, that can be really forever challenging and damaging, especially if that person is incapable of or unwilling to try and manage their own disorder. And a lot of people got in touch to say, like, I have similar experiences with my parents or with someone in my family, and I really appreciate it. I think I had a few Filipino people get in touch with me and say, like, I totally get it. Like, same with my mom or my dad or whatever. Because, I think there's the other thing is, like, I used to, just slap the sort of disorder label on my mom, just say, oh, she's got personality disorder, so, and this is the problem and blah, blah. But I think, like a lot of other mental illness as well, like these mental illnesses arise maybe partly from a genetic condition and just DNA and stuff like that. But I think a lot of it does come from history and the ravages of history and the conflict of history, especially imperial and colonial history, which is what has affected my parents and their countries. Violence alters people permanently, and sometimes people have the ability to overcome the way that their brain chemistry has been changed by that violence, but some people don't. And, a lot of our parents are among those people, especially because, our parents' generation and the generation before that did not see therapy as something worth doing. They saw it as like proof of insanity or proof of an inability to control yourself, or it was just as a weakness, I guess. And so it falls to people in our generation to not think like that and actually take the dive and confront our fears and our insecurities and the things that plague us, and like try to hopefully break the cycle of those things. So yeah, a lot of people feel that way. And I don't know, that's also why I feel good about releasing this music, because I know that, it's like, I know there are a lot of people who enjoy these things. I'm on Reddit a lot, and you see a lot of people posting about this shit on Reddit. It's not just me. I'm not unique. And so I'm certain that all these people will appreciate having music like this to sort of, just dance to and listen to.
Yeah, like that's the weight of, this generational shift of thinking about mental illness and therapy and all those things, is that, people like yourself and, our generation are really, yeah, feeling the weight of that and trying to break the cycles. And it is tough, but sharing that, whether through song or through a Reddit post or going to therapy and talking about it, just sharing it around does normalize it, and it makes other people going through the same thing, they feel seen, and then it forms community, and then all of the beauty comes out of that as well. So thank you for sharing not just that story with us, but also in your music and, throughout everything done, because I'm sure that you'll, touch a lot of hearts and, help a lot of people through sharing it. Impossible to segue from that into other things that we want to talk about, but
Sometimes
you
we
mentioned
need to.
we're normally decent at segues, but nothing was coming to me to segue from that into your Patreon that you mentioned before. So you've ditched the label, you're fully independent, and you're going the Patreon route of funding your music now. How has that shift been?
It's been great. It's not, like paying me a huge amount of money right now. It's probably at the moment like about 1,000 a month, which is quite good actually. Like it's a lot. It's money. It's not like covering my expenses, but it is like not nothing. But I just think it's so much better than a label because I still get to own my work and I don't have to deal with a committee that doesn't really understand a project and maybe is too marketing pilled. And I think the main problem with me is just like, yeah, I'm so not suited to that commercial space. Like just the way that I operate, the way that I think is not, or not even the art that I make, I don't think is compatible with the methods of marketing and stuff that the major label system uses. So it's been awesome being able to just do things on my own and then just get the support of people who like have a really deep connection with my music and really care enough to throw me $5 a month or something and want me to keep making stuff. So that's like such a fulfilling feeling as opposed to having been with the label. And I think there's a lot of detachment that comes with being a part of that system. You feel a little bit like I don't know, there's just like a wall between you and your audience or something like that, which I think some people want. And again, is why I, in particular, was not suited to the system because I don't really want that. I think, boundaries are good, but like I don't need a wall between myself and my fans. And so this is a much better way of doing things, I think. And also like, yeah, it's just like another place to express myself as an artist, which is nice. And to an audience who's like enlisted to hear that sort of stuff, you know what I mean? Because even with social media, right, like a lot of people might follow you nowadays off the back of a reel that does well or whatever, not realizing that maybe like your thing isn't just posting those kinds of reels. You do like a lot of different stuff, but it's like people who go to my Patreon who expect to just hear whatever comes out of my mouth, whatever that may be. It doesn't have to be a repetitive formula. So that's really awesome. And also, I don't know. This is what I was going to say. I heard recently that apparently labels are contemplating introducing subscriptions to artists via Spotify. Like, I was like, okay, so it's Patreon, except that the label gets a cut of your Patreon. And that's insane. So I just, like, this is the thing, right? Is like streaming isn't paying. Radio doesn't help artists that much anymore. It's really hard to sell tickets to live gigs, especially within Australia. And if you're signed with a label, maybe they front up the money for you to make your record, but then they own everything and own you and sort of tell you what to do. So in my mind, having a Patreon, especially like this is the thing, starting a Patreon from scratch when you're a totally new artist, hard to do. You're not gonna get to $1,000 a month the way I have done in like the last 6 months, right? But I do think if you're a mid-level artist in 2025 and you're still signed to a label, I don't know. I think people should be getting on Patreon or something equivalent to it because like eventually we're going to get there anyway because the labels are running out of ways to make an increased profit year on year. And and Spotify as well, and all of these DSPs and stuff like that. So I just think, that is the way to do things. You rely on the goodwill of people who have a strong emotional connection to music, which is, I think, the way it should be. And the way it actually is, even with the labels, right? Like, you need an audience to like stream your music and buy your stuff. Just at least like that money's going directly to you instead of 80% to your label and then 20% or probably less to you. So, I just think, I was having a conversation with my friend Amy McNee, who's like a very successful like author and sort of like, I guess, what do you call it? Kind of like a motivational person. She does that kind of stuff. But we were like saying, imagine if Taylor Swift got a Patreon. Like, she would be a trillionaire. Imagine if every person that loved Taylor Swift paid her $5 a month. That is an insane amount of money. And also, it doesn't have to go to a label. She could just start it on her own, and she would be getting like literally $1 billion per year probably without having to hand it off to anyone else. So like, I don't know. Not to say, like, in my head, I'm not like, I'm very much not like a profits maxing type person, you know what I mean? But like, if we are talking about ways to make income without the interference of corporations in 2025, when like capitalism is the only option we have right now, and it's very difficult to introduce an alternative, I think, like, let's do Patreon. Like, I think that's a good call. So I'm having a good time with it, and it's like always so awesome. Like, I don't get many new Patreons like week on week or whatever, but when I do get one, I'm like, that's the best. Like, that's awesome. And yeah, so that's been my experience with Patreon.
I think you've outlined really well the shift that we are moving towards. Not only, we've talked about authenticity with social media. You're now talking about Patreon, and how do people feel connected to you to pay you $5 a month to your Patreon? It's because you've been authentic on social media. So these things are lining up very nicely for people like yourself who don't want to go down the commercial route and be attached to labels, and you have complete freedom and ownership over your music and your processes, and you're not pitching anything to any executives, you're just doing your own thing, which is really, really cool. But I want to talk about the physical attachment to music as well. I saw you posted the other week that you bought a vinyl for the first time ever. And
yeah, well, I've owned record players previously, but I've never been able to set them up. Never had like a hi-fi system, so we finally did that, which is cool.
Yeah, so as an artist, I'm curious, what did it change? Because you said you now obviously understand the physical connection to having a vinyl, placing the needle, and as opposed to just hitting play on your phone or computer to play the music. So as an artist, did anything change or click in that moment for you? Or was it purely as a consumer, you were like, oh my God, this is amazing?
I was mostly thinking as a consumer. As an artist though, I think I definitely noticed like artwork more. I was already always interested in artwork, but I think now I'm like, when I'm producing like album art or something like that, I feel like I need to think about the way it'll look on vinyl as well. Not that it really matters that much in terms of scale, but like, I think it's cool to be thinking about things that way. I think, I've been fretting over a little bit because we're going to produce vinyl for this next record. I've been fretting over like the way that the vinyl itself looks, and there are so many options for colors and the way to do the label and all that stuff. And I was like, I want there to be like, I want to have like blue vinyl, and I wanted to customize the sticker and stuff, and all these like expenses sort of add up, and I'm sort of like sacrificing a bit of money, like focusing on these customizations. But like, it's cool to have, but like all the records I've been playing, I'm like, it's cool. They're cool on their own, even if it is just like the black vinyl. Like, that's cool. I don't need it to be blue and stuff. It does, again, look very beautiful and looks very cool, but like my experience of putting the record on doesn't really change that much with all of that. So that's been a nice thing to take into account as an artist, I suppose, who is producing that kind of material. But yeah, I think it's also just made me think a bit more about how sound works, I suppose, and that it's incredible that we're able to have this technology and that this was developed. And despite the fact that it is an old technology, it still feels futuristic to me, if you know what I mean. It's like, how did we manage to get sound to come out of this like circle? You know, like
I've literally been having the same thought lately when I like pull out the camera on my phone, and I'm like, how is it that I can capture this and then like have
yeah.
a copy of what I'm looking at right now? Those weird things, but I think it's really interesting because so much of what we've spoken about tonight with your album is about it not fitting into these kind of traditional gaps and not reflecting the way that we're told music should be made. And I suppose vinyl doesn't anymore in the way that music is released now, but you've got this kind of fusing of you're making and producing this album in a way that is true to you and is perhaps unconventional, but works really, really well. And then you're going to go and press it onto a vinyl, which in one way does represent the traditional way that we are meant to present and consume music. But at the same time, it's old tech, and how we actually produce and consume music now is mostly via streaming and has that kind of disconnect, so much so that that old tech feels new. So the fusion of all those elements on your record in particular, I think, are fascinating.
Yeah. I think, this is a tangential thought, but something I've been like listening to a lot lately is like jungle and D&B and stuff because of this like video game I've been working on and just been exploring like sort of amen breaks and sort of like the ethereal sort of pads from the 90s and stuff like that. I think it's so interesting the way that like our vision of the future has changed today. In the 90s and 2000s, that's sort of what the future sounded like. And I think now it's kind of less magical to me. I think like the way that we conceive of the future and its aesthetic is kind of like sanitized and a bit boring, maybe a bit too minimalistic, when back then it was very like glossy and colorful and beautiful. And I think with this album as well, I was trying to capture a bit more of that. Like there's not a lot of the sort of D&B stuff on my album. There's a bit of amen breaky stuff on there, but it's like kind of unrecognizable. I've used samples, but I've kind of edited them a little bit. But to my point, I think I think my favorite version or even fictional version of the future is like the one we conceived of like in the 90s and 2000s. And I think I tried to recapture that on my album while also including slightly more modern touches or, touches from 2024 and today. So yeah, I think also like this is where I come from with it is like I'm a historical materialist and I believe that the material reality of the world has informed our history and the way our relationships and power structures relate to each other, and that's also the case in music. And I think it's really important to acknowledge the lineage of musical history and stuff like that, and to be able to revisit maybe some old favorites. I mean, by extension CDs and the rest of it as well, but it is just like quite incredible that you can just like put a little thing on a thing and then spin it around and then like music comes out. I think that's very cool.
I still do the same thing with it.
And incorporate them into new music to sort of remind ourselves of the way that our present has come to be. And to remind ourselves as well of like what has been and what is possible and what could happen again, and like maybe let's keep the good stuff and like leave this bad stuff in the past, yeah.
Yes, and there's so much to be said for physical copies of things as well. And I suppose, I mean, if we can tie back to the Patreon thing, for you as an artist, when you do release the vinyl edition of your forthcoming yet to be determined name or release date album, that is a fantastic way to support you for fans listening. So Patreon as well, but to buy the physical copy, that is a really good way to support you. And you mentioned earlier about how hard it is to make money off how music traditionally had been profitable. So for all of the beautiful reasons why vinyl and physical copies are great, on top of that, it is just a fantastic way to support an artist that you love.
Yeah. Whenever the vinyl is out, I'll let people know and they can buy it. Again, I have no idea when that is, but once I know, there'll be an announce and people can pick that up. So yeah.
And sorry, will there be a coloured version as well? Because I don't know, you can call me pretentious if you want, but I have my collection of vinyls. If there is a coloured version, I will buy the coloured version just because it looks pretty when it's spinning around.
Oh, totally, yeah. I think so. We have to revisit it. We got some quotes and stuff like that. We need to like pick. This is the thing, is like all this was kind of happening at the end of the year when everything was closing up, so we had to put a pin in it. But I think I'm gonna aim for a colored version of the vinyl. So yeah, I'll let you know.
I'll tell you what, I'll subscribe to the Patreon, and at whatever tier gets me a coloured vinyl, that's
Yeah,
what I'll
yeah, awesome. Totally, yeah.
But that is probably, is it patreon.com/Montaigne, or what's the
Yeah,
page
that's
for
it.
people to go to? Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, just yeah, patreon.com/Montaigne, or you can just look up Montaigne in the Patreon search bar and it'll be there. Easy. It's easy.
And you stream on Twitch as well. People can donate to you during a Twitch stream and all that fun stuff as well. So there are plenty of ways to support an artist like Montaigne. Just quickly as well, you're playing a bit north of us on the Central Coast in the Hunter Valley in Colburn on the 25th of January. You're playing at A Day on the Green.
Yeah, I'm excited for those shows. Yeah, doing that. It's sort of national tour, so there'll be a few gigs all around. But yeah, they'll be really fun. I've done a Day on the Green before and it was really awesome, so I'm keen to do it again.
And a lot of music from the upcoming album, or will it be
We'll play the 2 singles that have come out and then a new single, I think, and then the rest will be the hits.
Love it. Quickly on that too, before we let you go, because you've been very generous with your time, so we appreciate it. I remember when you released "Dying Song" a few years ago now. My wife was terrified that was your retirement song. That you
Retirement song.
this was like your way of saying, "I'm done.
So
See you
funny.
later."
You're right.
It's nice to hear that you haven't happened.
No. That song's like from the perspective of like Link from The Legend of Zelda. And it's like, what if that guy, if he died and then it was over, and then the world does end? It's like, that's a scary thought. But in fact, he lives in a fantasy world where he can just keep getting revived over and over again. Thank God for that, right? Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Montaigne, thank you so much for coming on and sharing everything with us. It's been so great to catch up, so great to chat to you and learn about it. We cannot wait for the release of this album. But in the meantime, if you're listening, go listen to those 2 singles that are out so far. Buy a ticket to A Day on the Green if you can get there. Support on Patreon and pre-order a coloured vinyl as well if you can. Do all of those things. But Montaigne,
Yes.
thank you so much. It's been awesome.
No worries. Thanks so much for the chat, guys.
Thank you.